My name's Rachel Carter, and the night my brother tried to humiliate me with a $9,800 rent demand, I decided to ruin him. That night was supposed to be family dinner. Loud, messy, full of jokes. But it turned into something else. We were sitting at this nice restaurant in downtown LA, the kind of place with candles and fake smiles. My parents were already laughing too loud. My brother Jake was talking about his new real estate project, and his wife Melissa sat beside him looking like she owned the room. I had no idea I was the entertainment for the night. Jake leaned back in his chair, smirking. "So Rich, if you're planning to keep living in my guest house, rent's going up to $9,800. At first I thought he was joking. I laughed, but no one else did. He repeated it. "You heard me. $9,800. Market rate. Family discount included." The table went quiet. My stomach dropped. My parents exchanged glances, but didn't say anything. My dad cleared his throat and said, "Well, your brother's got a point. You can't stay there forever." My mom tried to soften it. "He just wants you to be independent, honey." Independent. Right. I'd been independent for years, juggling 2 jobs, paying off mom's hospital bills when Jake didn't lift a finger. But in their eyes, I was still the failure. Melissa gave me that fake little smile of hers. "Maybe it's good for you, Rachel. Push you to grow up a bit." I felt my face burn. Grow up? I've been keeping this family from falling apart while you two play house in Malibu. Jake laughed. "Oh, come on, don't get emotional. It's just business." I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile so they wouldn't see how much it hurt. "You're right, business." That was the moment I decided to destroy his. After dinner, I sat in my car for a long time. I could still hear their laughter from inside the restaurant. It wasn't just about the rent, it was about humiliation. They wanted to remind me I was beneath them. A guest. An inconvenience. I wasn't going to cry. Not this time. Jake liked to post everything online. His success, his perfect life, his grind. He'd always been the golden boy. But I knew the truth behind the filters. I knew he bought that mansion with borrowed money. I knew he cut corners on his investment property. He bragged about flipping houses, but half of what he did was illegal. Permits ignored, inspections skipped, taxes avoided. And the best part, he documented every bit of it online. That night, while the city hummed outside my window, I opened my laptop and started digging. County records, property data, his Instagram stories. All of it painted one picture. A man 1 complaint away from losing everything. I didn't sleep. I collected documents, screenshots, email. I created a new email account with no trace back to me and sent everything, the violations, the fake invoices, the photos to the city inspection department. I hit send and sat back, heart pounding. 2 weeks later, my mom called. "Rachel, something awful happened," she said, her voice shaking. "The city came to Jake's house. They're saying half the renovations weren't legal. They shut down his whole business." I bit my lip to hide the smile forming. "Oh no," I said softly. "That's terrible," she sighed. Poor Melissa's beside herself. "They're saying they could lose the house." I looked out the window at the LA skyline and whispered, maybe it's time they learned about independence. A few days later, I drove past their place, the same one Jake used to brag about. The front gate had a big red "Stop Work" notice taped to it. Jake was outside, pacing on the phone, yelling. Melissa stood near the porch, makeup smeared, crying. I parked far enough so they couldn't see me. I just watched. Every scream, every frustrated call, it felt like justice. For years I was the one struggling while they lived like royalty. And now watching their empire crumble, I didn't feel guilty, I felt free. But karma wasn't done yet. That evening, I got a text from Melissa. "Hey Rachel, I know things are tense, but can we talk? It's about Jake, please." I stared at my phone for a long minute. Melissa never texted me, unless she wanted something. I typed back, "Sure, come over tomorrow." She thought she was walking into a pity conversation. But really, she was walking into the first step of my real revenge. She came the next afternoon, like she owned the place. Clean coat, soft hair, the exact same polite voice she used at family dinners when she wanted something. Melissa knocked twice, then smiled when I opened the door, like we were old friends catching up. Rachel, she said, too bright. Thanks for seeing me. Come in, I said. The guest house smelled like coffee and laundry. I shut the door, sat at the tiny kitchen table, and watched her. For months, she'd been posting glossy photos of their house and sipping champagne, pretending everything was perfect. Now she looked tired, like the gloss had come off. She sat down and didn't waste time. Jake's a mess, she said, hands curled around a paper cup. The city shut us down. We're bleeding money. Contractors are holding invoices. Investors are pulling out. I don't know what to do. Her voice shook a little. I listened, letting the tremor fill the room. Can I be honest? She asked. We thought you did it. I blinked. What do you mean? Melissa looked down. People are talking. Someone blamed you for the complaint. They say you were jealous and petty. Jake swears you're capable of anything. Mom's been asking if you had something to do with it. There it was, the old move they always used. Redirect the shame toward me, so they didn't have to look at their own hands. They'd humiliated me once. Now they wanted to make me the villain, so they could fit back into their comfortable story. I didn't do it, I said. My voice was steady. But if people think I did, it's because someone wanted it that way. Melissa's eyes dropped. For a beat, she looked like a real person, not a polished accessory. Rachel, please, I'm asking you as a friend. Help us. Tell them you didn't do it. I let her talk while I planned. In that pause, I decided I would play along long enough to learn everything. If they wanted to make me the villain, I'd make sure the story they told didn't protect them. Okay, I said finally. I'll help. Tell me everything. Who's calling? What the contractors are saying? Who's missing payments? Give me names, dates, everything. She poured out the panic. A roofer demanding $8,000. A plumbing company threatening Lane. A private investor who'd wired a down payment and now wanted out. She mentioned one name twice. A broker Jake had been texting. Someone Jake had said could put up quick cash for the finish work. That's the thread I pulled. After she left, I sat down and wrote every name she'd said on a pad. I cross-referenced what she'd told me with the records I had already gathered. A pattern started to appear. Quick loans, friendly vendors, favors exchanged for furniture or small investment. It wasn't elegant bookkeeping. It was a patchwork. It was fragile. That night, I did two things. I called a contact at a small title company, an old client of mine who owed me a favor, and asked about a wire transfer. He checked and told me a few details. A big withdrawal, a transfer that matched the date Dad had mentioned helping Jake out. It wasn't illegal. Families helped. But the timing looked bad in light of everything else. I typed up a timeline and saved it. Second, I fed Melissa a small I didn't accuse, I just said, if someone's pointing fingers, maybe you should ask Jake about the contractor invoices. People have been fluffing those numbers to make the work look finished when it wasn't. He might be panicking and trying to bury it. She blinked. Relief washed over her face like she'd found a life preserver. You think he would do that? She whispered. He's desperate, I said. Desperate people do desperate things. I watched her go, clutching that lifeline, and my stomach tightened. If she was naive, I could use it. If she was complicit, she would reveal it. Either way, she was useful. A week later, the rumor mill turned ugly. Jake's friends started whispering at neighborhood barbecues. Someone called my boss and asked if I'd been home the night the complaint went in. I got a text from an unknown number. We all know you did it. Karma. It stung, but it also told me that they were scrambling for answers and reaching for easy targets. That's when I pushed. I set up a meeting with the investors who'd pulled out. I didn't introduce myself as Rachel Carter with righteous anger and a score to settle. I introduced myself as someone who could help them see the whole picture. A designer who'd worked on renovations and understood timelines and contractor behavior. They were wary at first, but once you're honest and calm, people relax. They told me more than they meant to. Names, dates, how they'd wired money, how the contractor told them they were good to go but the final inspections hadn't been signed. One of the investors mentioned a name they trusted, a broker who'd sold Jake a short-term promissory note through a private circle. He'd promised quick flips, quick returns, and priority access to deals. He's been involved in several sketchy loans. The investor told me, but Jake is the worst. He pushed the pace. We thought he knew what he was doing. Now files are missing. I took notes. I asked for copies of the emails and bank transfers. They gave them reluctantly, thinking perhaps I'd sympathize, or that I had some solution up my sleeve. I did have a solution. It was to show them a clearer map of where their money had gone. While I was meeting investors, Jake escalated. He started showing up at my workplace, loud, apologetic in the wrong ways, trying to make me feel cornered. "Rachel," he would say, "we can fix this. Just please, don't make it worse." He stood too close, his breath smelling like cheap whiskey. The old family dynamics rose like a nausea. In those moments I remembered why I'd come this far. Humiliation, and then their attempt to make me the villain of my own life, so they could sleep in the lie. One night, after he'd left my office embarrassed and incoherent, I sat and read through the emails again. Jake had, in his hurry, written things in plain English. "We'll cover the inspection. Wire will be there Wednesday. Don't mention permits." He'd tried to assure vendors and investors that he'd make it look like everything was on the level. The words were clumsy and damning. He had authorized payments that never cleared, asked vendors to paper invoices, promised investors fast flips with minimal oversight. This was it. The paper trail I needed. I didn't go to Dad. I didn't call Mom. I didn't confront Jake in any loud public way. Instead, I took a slower, quieter approach that would make their collapse inevitable without looking like something I orchestrated. First, I printed copies of the emails and bank transfers showing Jake's promises and the funds moving in odd directions. I put one folder in a safe deposit box under a fake name, a small extreme I rationalized because the family had treated me like an enemy in public. I left another folder with the investor who had first trusted me that week, the one who told me he wished someone had shown him the whole picture earlier. I told him simply, "You should have everything. If you want to pursue this, now you can." Second, I drove to the contractor's shop, the one that had been cutting corners. I sat in my rental car and watched men unload tiles and listened to phone calls. When the owner came out, I called him over on pretense. I needed a quote for a client's remodel. He prided himself on speed and secrecy. He bragged loudly and casually that sometimes they just got it done without final sign-off so homeowners could move in and start enjoying. He didn't know I'd heard him later chant the exact phrase that the city inspectors would find. I recorded the conversation on my phone, not because I wanted to trap him in some illegal act, but because the truth in his voice would be evidence, confirmation that corners were cut, and he'd been paid to do it. I started to release carefully chosen threats. I let a copy of Jake's offhand email, where he asked to paper an invoice, find its way to the contractor's supplier. Suddenly, the supplier remembered that the original invoice matched a contractor note and asked for proof. Places that had been casual and friendly with Jake began to ask for documentation. The same people who once cheered his name were now asking hard questions. Word spread, investors who once called him a maverick now called him a lender who'd offered a bridge loan for a week now demanded proof of permits and lines. The pressure closed like a fist. Then Jake made a stupid, angry move. He went on a local neighborhood Facebook group and posted a passive-aggressive message about people spreading lies to hurt family. He didn't name me. Of course, he was too cowardly for that. But he made sure to mention someone who wanted to ruin their good name. That post lit a match. The comment section filled with whispers, accusations, and threats. Someone posted a screenshot of a contractor's message about fast finish that matched a line from one of Jake's emails. The comments went from, "We're praying for you," to "What the hell were you thinking?" in less than an hour. That night, my parents called me crying. Dad's voice was raw. "Rachel, what's happening? People are talking. Where did this start?" He wanted to believe it was bad luck, a freak inspection, anything but the truth that their son had built an illusion on other people's money. I could have told them everything right then. I could have marched into the house and held up the emails. But I'd learned the hard way that honesty without consequences gets snuffed out by comfort. If I wanted them to understand, I needed them to see the consequences in the only language they listen to, money and reputation. So I let the evidence move. I let the investors take the emails to their lawyers. I watched as the lender demanded answers and set a default clause on the loan if the issues weren't resolved. The contractor's supplier put a lien on Jake's property for unpaid materials. Small domino. One by one, they hit the dust. In the middle of it, Melissa called me twice. The first time I answered, she was quiet and scared, asking me to come over to talk to Jake. I told her I would. The second time, she left a voicemail apologizing for the fight in the driveway earlier and begging me to not speak to the investors. She wanted me to be the good daughter, the one who patched things up so no one else saw the cracks. For the first time, I felt real pity for her. She hadn't realized how deep the hole was. Or maybe she had and had chosen the shine anyway. It didn't matter which. When I walked into their kitchen, Jake was there with his hands on his head, pacing. Melissa looked like she hadn't slept. For a second, they both looked like ordinary people, crushed by a mistake. My face softened. Just a notch. I'm so sorry, Melissa said. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Didn't mean, Jake laughed then, a bitter, low sound. We were careless. We thought we could slide it by. We thought other people's money would always make the story. I sat down and said one quiet thing. You built your life on favors and shortcuts. Those things have a way of coming due. He flinched like I'd struck him. He opened his mouth to say something, to beg, to threaten. But the phone rang. His broker, then the investor. He stepped into the hallway and listened. When he came back, his face had that particular brittle look of a man who knows a door is closing. You have a lot to answer for, Jake, I said. And your friends want receipts. They'll want legal proof, not your charm. He glared at me, hating that I could look at him like that. He had expected me to be small, to be ashamed, to beg. Instead, I'd grown into someone who kept lists and made calls and watched their empire quietly fall. Melissa grabbed my arm, tears in her eyes. Rachel, please, we can fix it. Tell them we'll pay. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I squeezed her hand back. Hard. You can offer what you don't have. I can't make people hand over money they don't have. But you can make a choice. Be honest now, or live with the consequences. Which is it? She didn't answer. Her silence said everything. Later that week, a lawyer representing one of the investors called Dad. The tone on the phone was official and cold. It wasn't about family anymore. Contracts were being reviewed. The bank was looking closely at the collateral. My parents' retirement account showed a withdrawal that, while legal, looked reckless to outsiders. On a rainy Tuesday, a certified letter arrived at their house. Notice of default on a line of credit tied to Jake's business. Mom read it aloud, voice cracking. How could this happen? She whispered. For the first time, I heard fear that wasn't dressed up as dignity. It's a strange thing, watching people who once laughed at you suddenly stumble. I won't lie. The satisfaction was sharp, but it was also complicated. My father sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. My mother paced in circles. This was not just Jake's collapse. It was the unspooling of a family narrative that had sheltered them all. By the time the bank came knocking with a demand for documentation, Jake's options were thin. He called me in a panic and begged me to help, to stand up and say I wasn't involved, to plead their case. I could have lied. I could have said whatever would soothe him. I didn't. Instead, I took all the documents I'd collected and walked into the bank meeting with their investor's lawyer and the contractor's supplier. I sat quietly while they listed the missing permits, the unpaid bills, the forged-looking invoices that showed payments to shell companies. I watched Jake's face when his life was unfolded in front of men who had no love for him. He looked small and hollow. The room smelled like coffee and cheap cologne. After the meeting on the sidewalk where the rain washed the city clean, Jake grabbed my sleeve. You'll tell them it wasn't you, right? He pleaded. Please, we're family. I looked at him. It was an odd moment. Family pleading for mercy from the very person they'd humiliated. Jake, I said, family doesn't laugh at a person when they're down. You laughed at me and everyone applauded. Now we live in the consequences of your choices. He lowered his head and for the first time began to cry. I didn't take pleasure in the tears. Tears are small, private things. The real victory was the lesson that finally landed. Choices have consequences. If you humiliate someone for sport, don't be surprised when they find a way to make you pay. That night, I sat alone and made one more call. There was one more place to push. The neighborhood association that liked to host summer parties. The same one that had once praised Dad for his steady hand. I sent them a careful note. Nothing dramatic. Just I told them there were unresolved lanes and code violations related to Jake's properties, and that they might want to pause their plans for any events at his home. It was the last small poke. By morning, invitations were canceled. People who had once chatted at the post office now stopped by with awkward condolences and a nervous distance. It had been work, patient, ugly, legal work. And now it showed. The house's light stayed off more nights than on. Melissa stopped posting. Jake's calls went unanswered by old friends. Dad's pride had cracks running through it like dried riverbeds. I won't pretend I was pure through all this. I made choices that hurt people I loved in order to make those people face the truth. But as the dust settled and the dominoes found their places, a strange thing happened. The family had to look at itself. They had to decide whether they wanted to rebuild on honesty or continue patching things with lies. At the kitchen table the next Sunday, my mother looked up at me with wet eyes. "Rachel," she said softly, "we never meant to make you feel like that. We were ashamed." The words were small and raw, and for once they weren't tied to an excuse. I could have accepted that apology and let things drift back into the comfortable haze. But some lessons have to stick. I told them what I wanted. Public acknowledgement to the people they'd harmed, the contractors who'd been stiffed, the investors they'd misled, and the neighbors who'd been lied to. I asked them to help make things right. To their credit and their shame, they agreed. It wasn't enough to erase what happened, but it was something. Months later, the house was sold at a loss. Jake moved into a small rental. Melissa took a job she'd once scoffed at. My parents sold a small piece of land to cover debt. The neighborhood's whispers changed from contempt to cautious sympathy. The story had shifted from scandal to cautionary tale. One morning, as I watered my sad little plant, I got an email from a woman named Anna, a former contractor's assistant, who'd been left unpaid during the chaos. "Thank you," she wrote. "Because of the restitution fund, I can pay my rent. I have a job again." She sent a photo of her new badge at a hardware store. I sat down and cried for the first time fully. Not out of triumph, but because something in the mess I made helped someone else. That moment made the whole thing less bitter. It didn't erase the nights I lay awake remembering my brother's laugh or my mother's cheer, but it added a layer to the story. The hurt I felt had been transformed into something useful. In the end, the revenge wasn't about ruin for ruin's sake. It was about exposing a truth they were too proud to see and making them live with the choices they had made. They laughed at me once. I made sure they would never laugh at me again. Sometimes justice is loud. Most of the time it's quiet, slow, and ugly. But it is real. And when it landed in a way that made my family start to put the pieces back together. Differently. More honestly. And with a price paid in full.